Welcome back, everybody. I am so excited about the author I'm going to interview today. I had just finished her book last night. If you can't tell with the bags under my eyes, because I was so obsessed. And I'm so upset that the next book doesn't come out until October. What is with that? But nonetheless, she released this book 2 weeks ago, and within the first week, it had over 2,000 reviews and ratings. This just shows how anticipated this release was. And when I say that I love this book, I loved this book, and I'm so excited to talk all about it. EJ Mellow, how are you today?
I'm good, thank you. You're making me blush over here.
No, I honestly I absolutely am obsessed with this book. It reminded me much of an author who I loved as a teenager and actually got me into writing myself. So I don't know if you're familiar with Kristen Cashaw's work.
Yes.
Yeah, so it really took me back to that same ambience, that same kind of, well, not the same writing style, but it really, the gritty, the dark fantasy, the slow burn, the romance, it really, really sucked me in. And I can say hands down that you are one of my one-click authors now. So thank you so much for taking me on that journey.
Okay, thank you. That's such a big compliment. Thank you so much.
I want you to take me back to the start. I want to know, when did you start writing? Why? How was the process to finishing the book to publishing? Take me back to the journey.
Wow, how far back do we want to go?
All the way back.
Okay, all the way back. Cut to me being born. No, so I fell in love with writing. I think I can pinpoint the time period was in high school, and I had an English elective class with Katie Kenny, Mrs. Kenny, thank you wherever you are. And she did a fairy tale class, because I think a lot of us can relate to those mandatory books we had to read in English class, the summer reading, the classics, and they were fine. But as a girl growing up, there wasn't a lot of female representation in those. It was always a young, young men. It was more of if it was young adult, it was boys that were the heroes. So I think when I had my fairy tale class, a lot of fairy tales, though dark, they had female heroines in them, Cinderella, Little Mermaid, things like that. So when I started learning the symbolism found in fairy tales and that women were the stars of these fairy tales, I became obsessed. I just was this is amazing. I love reading this stuff. And that's kind of where I started, copying fairy tale arcs and genres and finding all the symbolism in them. And then when I read Island of the Blue Dolphin, I don't know if that's something. It's based off of a true story about this indigenous girl who gets shipwrecked on an island by herself, and she doesn't speak yet. That's how young she is. So she ends up growing up and learning and teaching herself this made up language, and she's by herself on this island for years and years and years and years, and it's about her survival. And I think it was for me, it was the female version of Hatchet, which was another big young adult book, I guess, at the time, but featured a boy. And I just was obsessed. I was oh my goodness, this is amazing. It's this young girl who's an adventurous. She's living by herself. She's a wolf as a friend. She's building her house out of whale bones. The whole thing was just sparking everything, all of my excitement. So that's when I really got into it and just started kind of faking it, I guess, for a bit, copying a lot of books and making up my own little fairy tales. And then cut to me in my 20s living in New York. I'm still working advertising, but I was working in advertising at the time. And I started writing because advertising is creative, but it sucks a lot of that creativity out because a lot of it is, I guess, picked apart and crapped on very quickly by clients and creative directors and the whole thing. So the creativity, it doesn't live freely. So writing became my safe space for my creativity. I would late nights, weekends, early mornings, just write this story. And at the time, my boyfriend was you should share this with an editor friend of mine. And I was what are you talking about? No, you're mad because one, we all have our doubts when we were writing, this isn't good. And two, it was my safe space. I was I don't want anybody to read this. This is what gives me joy away from all the other art direction and writing. I was I'm not going to share that with anybody because then it'll be ruined. But I ended up giving it to her and she loved it. And she's this could be a book. And then that's kind of where my journey really began with publishing and everything.
So was that book The Dreamer?
Yes, it was The Dreamer.
Because I haven't yet read it, but I will. But I found the blurb, like it sucked me in as well. Like basically a short snippet concept, and correct me if I'm wrong, was basically about a girl who's going into a different world when she dreams, and then she is struggling with that. She, there's adventure, there's a boy in there, and there's all these different things, and she wants to continuously keep going back. So then it turns into, would you rather be in the dream world or reality? And I kind of resonated with that a little bit, because as an avid reader as well, I'm like, that'll hit home for a lot of people. So I'm really, really intrigued by that series. How did you go from writing it to actually accepting that, okay, maybe I will share this with a couple of people, maybe I will publish it? How did that work for you?
Well, first, I'm so happy that that's something that you can resonate with, because this, like, the beginning part of The Dreamer was really twofold, just to maybe back up a bit before I answer your actual question. That with The Dreamer, I was reading a lot of books, and I think young adult was like big then. Like that's when I think maybe Twilight came out, and like everybody was, voraciously reading about romance and paranormal and this whole thing. But I wasn't reading anybody in their 20s. Everybody was teenagers. And as somebody in my 20s at the time, I was like, man, does that mean life's over? Like, does that mean the excitement is over? Because there were so many 16-year-olds and 15-year-olds and 14-year-olds, Harry Potter, like finding this magic, right? And they were like, oh my God, this is so cool. So I was like, man, is there no magic left in your 20s? And that was me desperate to find. They called it new adult at the time. I think now it's just, I don't know if new adult is still a thing. I'm not quite sure if that genre is like big, because now it's just, I guess, adult. But that's what made me want to write it. I was like, I want to write a character that's reflective of me, that has magic, that has like this amazing thing. And also, to your point, it was like me reading all these books, wishing I could live in them, being like, why aren't these real? And then I was like, okay, where can I play that theme off with a girl who wants to live in this other world? So that was that. But as far as going from writing it to eventually self-publishing, it was a long process. I mean, self-publishing at the time was not what it is now. Like, there wasn't a Kindle Unlimited. There wasn't, I think Colleen Hoover, I mean, she's like the big, romance author, and she first self-published, I think iBooks was the first place you could self-publish books. And yes, there wasn't a lot out there. You couldn't really like Google anything about it. So I went and I edited the book a long time, and then I queried for a full year with the book. And I think there just wasn't a, new adult paranormal romance, contemporary romance wasn't a thing. It wasn't a genre. It was all young adult. It was all middle grade contemporary fantasy or magical realism. So that's when I was like, well, I just really believe in this. I really do. And because I had that advertising background, I decided to self-publish. And really, for the only reason of, I wanted this out there and I wanted to keep writing. So I think like anybody who's a writer and actually finishes their manuscripts, it's because you believe in it so much, and you're not writing for an audience, you're writing for yourself. And that's really what happened with me.
Yeah. And I want to say too to that as well. So first, because it's coming across to me that you're a very humble person, and I love it. So I'm going to brag for you. You've done really well in that series, and you've won numerous awards on it. So you know what you're doing as well. And the covers are beautiful. I absolutely love it. And I think too, a lot of you does come out. I've only known you for 10, 15 minutes, but reading the one book that I have, a lot of you does come through that. And I can also say, like, when I read your acknowledgements in the back, it was really heartwarming because of how much love and affection you put into thanking your family and friends. And even the way that you talk about your family, how creative they are, how supportive they are when it comes to the artiste. You can tell that a lot of that has really come through in your series. And I do want to talk a little bit actually about the series. I'm only saying that because I don't know how to pronounce the girls' names.
Oh yeah, we can get into that.
But I really want to talk about that book, because I started reading this book, I think it was about 3 days ago, and your opening chapter, I'm not going to give away any spoilers or anything like that, but it's basically the three little girls played in blood. I'm probably discrediting that a little bit, but that's a starting chapter and notion of these three little girls who have no idea what they're playing in, and it really sets the tone for the book. And then you go straight into the second chapter with the character who is in an interesting position, compromise, should I say, where she's injured for it, which I love. And I was like, okay. I see this is a bit, because I think people are very sometimes graphic when they go into dark fantasy. And I love that yours just swimmingly, it just beautifully goes through. And even though you're writing about dark context, it flows so beautifully. Like, I find it more beautiful than tormenting than anything else. So I really, really resonated with most of the chapters, actually. So I would love to learn a little bit more about that series, because I'm just totally fangirling right now. Look at me blushing.
Oh, thank you so much. I mean, I guess it kind of goes back to that one question I answered about where I fell in love with stuff, because if you read original fairy tales, they're dark, but they're not grotesque. And I think I love that you picked that out with that it is a dark romance, but it's not a horror. I guess that's where you kind of would separate the two genres. And it's because I find, I think Leigh Bardugo does this so well with her Language of Thorns. Yeah, I know. Let's just all gush now. But have you read her short stories, Language of Thorns?
Oh, I haven't.
They're fairy tales that I think, and I know people are going to be screaming that I don't know this, but it's from her Grisha series. I think it's kind of like, these are the fairy tales that live in that world. And they're beautifully dark, but gorgeous, So she like paints this haunting, cruel forest, but then there's this this protagonist, it's usually a woman, kind of going through it and surviving, or this is her normal, like she's used to these grotesque things, but to her it's her life, and that's not so traumatizing to her. And when I set out to write this book, I was really intrigued by that. I was intrigued by fairy tales where this is the world, this is the normal for them, and this is what you grew up in. And does that necessarily mean that you're a monster or you're grotesque too? Or is this just something where, you're trying to survive it the best you can and cope with it the best you can, but there is still beauty in it, and there's still beauty, in these weird laws and stuff like that? Because if you look around us, people could probably say the same thing about our world if you describe it in certain context. So I was really intrigued by, one, that, and two, the good versus evil. I just don't find it so parallel. Like, I think, we all have both in us. And I was really intrigued with finding characters that do bad things for good. And I was like, where would they come from? What would they be like? And how do they maintain a sense of, I guess, frivolity in themselves? And how would they do that? And I think that's where I draw from my family, because anytime I've coped with something traumatic, they're there for me, or, hard, they're there for me. And that's kept light of the situation, or kept my light on. So I was really, it is so much a love story to my sisters and my parents, and just them growing that and supporting it. So I think that's the germination of it all. That's really what, I can maybe talk about the exact spark I got of it, but that's really, I think I've been holding that in me for a very long time. And I've been waiting for the right moment to, one, be good at my craft enough to tell the story properly the way I wanted to tell it, and also to figure out exactly what this world is based off of those.
And you can, hands down, you can feel that. When I was reading it, I could feel it. And I don't say this too often to authors, and when I say you are one of those who I will read all the time now, that is genuine. I'd put you up with Leigh Bardugo because I absolutely love her. And it is the same thing. And I absolutely love that we're discussing this, is that and everyone has their own writing style, but I do love those who can write beautifully dark well, because a lot of people do throw in the grotesque shock factor, because they do want that memorable scene, whereas your whole book is that memorable scene. And it did make so much sense to me when I read that acknowledgement at the end, and when you thanked your sisters, and I was like, I get it. I feel that. You can sense the love that you've put into it, because obviously the series is based on three sisters who have each other's back, and yet they're so quick to throw a dagger at each other's face as well. Just to be like, well, will she catch it in time, won't she? And I love the cheekiness in that as well. So where did you get the initial spark and inspiration for it? Because I believe it was actually when you were traveling, wasn't it?
Yeah. There's a few things. I initially got a spark when I was working really late one night at the office when I was in New York, and I was the only one there, and I was sitting at my desk with my little light on, everything was black around me, and I heard the sound of a cane clicking down the hall. And I don't know why I immediately was like, oh, like I got like scared. And then I was kind of taken to this place of this girl in this castle, or in like kind of in a room, hearing a clicking cane of her captor, but she wasn't scared, and she purposely was captive. Like she went there to get captive, to be like captive of this guy. And I was like, whoa, like who would purposely get captured, and who would be scarier than the person who is keeping you captive? I was like, what kind of monster is that? And that's when I like had that seed for a while. And then when I was traveling, is where I get most of my inspiration from as far as setting goes, and world building, is when I started to kind of creep in, Adalore and what that is, and the Thief Kingdom, and who is this person and why are they there, and that whole thing. And that's really when I started to kind of pull the pieces together. But I got that spark of this girl, and then that's when the sister dynamic and all the family things kind of fell out from there.
Yeah, amazing. Do you want to give, for the viewers that haven't yet read it and must read it immediately, can you give them a little sort of like a taste of what the world is about? What is this series about?
Yeah, I'll try to do this. I'm so bad.
I know. I'm like, let's see how you do this, because every author I know struggles with the pitch.
Yeah, the pitch is why we have agents, so they can do it.
Absolutely.
So Song of the Foreverines is the first book in my Mousai series, which is about three sisters who are sorceresses and kind of like the henchmen to the Thief King in the Thief Kingdom. And they uphold the laws there. And each one of the sisters holds a special magical ability. And it's kind of like how muses are in Greek mythology. So it's song, dance, and music. And Lakira is the youngest of the sisters, and she has the power of song. So her voice literally is her power. And like anything with your voice, it can be beautiful and it can be deadly and sharp. And Song of the Foreverines is basically following Lakira's story as she learns to control her voice for good or for bad, or a mixture of both. And she's basically set on this solo mission to find out who's been stealing this very bad and powerful drug from the Thief Kingdom. So she goes to Lachlan to stay with the Duke to figure out where he's getting his source, because he's been stealing it. And on the way and through all that madness and spying, she kind of grows to have feelings for his stepson Darius, and it's kind of their unity and figuring out his whole haunted past of the stepfather and who she is, and kind of their mission together to overcome the Duke and the siphoning of the dark magic. Did I do it right?
A small part of me is a little bit annoyed, because I'm like, can you be any more perfect? Like, that's not even fair, because it was such a good pitch. I actually do have a question. Speaking of pitch, so you obviously started traditionally published. What made you decide to pitch this? Because I know you're working on this book for a couple of years. I sound like such a stalker, I realize right now.
No, this is
thorough research.
No, that's how you're supposed to be, right? When you're interviewing someone, is researching stuff.
What made you decide that you wanted to pitch this book? Because I know we were discussing prior to this interview how obviously you go from indie publishing and then you go to traditionally publishing. It takes some adjustment, because you have to relinquish some control, things change a little bit. So what made you decide to pitch again, and what was the process like? How long did you pitch, and what did you think when you got that letter to say, hey, I want to read more?
Yeah, so it was interesting. So to go back, for those who might not know my back catalog, I have had 4 books that I've indie published, a series called the Dreamland series, and then Animal Under the Fur, which is a contemporary action romance. And so I indie pubbed them. And actually with my 4th book, The Animal Under the Fur, is when I got signed with my agent. And then she was, asking me what I was working on after that. And I told her I was working on this Mousai series about these sisters. And once I finished writing the first draft of it and sent it to her, she immediately was like, we need to try and trad this. And it's funny, I was telling you this kind of earlier, but before, if you talked to a Jacqueline from 5 years prior to that moment, I would have been like, oh, yes, let's do it. Let's go. Let's like try it, the whole thing. But because I had so much control leading up to that moment, and I was getting readership and I was feeling momentum, and I was like, okay, you got to get a book out every year, the whole thing. I was trepidatious. I kind of took a step back and I was like, I know trad publishing is a whale and it takes forever. Like I was like, it is a slow beast. And they have their reasons for that, but I was like, what does that mean? Like, what does that mean for my readership? If I do this, it's going to take time. But then again, I was like, I'd be an idiot if I didn't try it. So that's kind of why I did that. I was like, let's try it. Let's see what happens. And we submitted it we did a bunch of edits. So once I did that, her and I kind of sat down, and I think maybe like might have been another 6 months of editing. And then we went out and queried to publishing houses as a young adult book, which is interesting. Yeah, because I always saw it as an adult book, but I think at the time there really isn't now any adult fantasy. It's just fantasy, and there's a lot of like George R.R. Martin, or Lord of the Rings, like really high fantasy that's more male oriented than female readership. So we made it young adult, which was really making the characters younger. Queried it for, it might have been like another 6 months. And everybody was like, we love it, but it feels older. They kept saying the same thing. It feels older. It feels older. And then finally I was like, yeah, because it is. Like I had this moment, like it is older. I don't feel like I'm meant for the young adult space. I love young adult, but I just, as a writer, I was like, I want to kind of explore darker themes. I want there to be sex. I want there to be curse words. I just wanted there to be certain things that there's some laws, Sarah J. Maas kind of blew a lot of that out of the water with her young adult series. But at the time that did not exist. So we went back and changed everything to be more adult. Then we queried that for another three or 4 months. And I swear I was going to give up. Like, I was like, this is it. Like, it's been almost like a year and a half since I've published anything. It's like, I'm losing readerships. What am I, like, readers? I'm like, what am I doing? I felt very fish out of the water. My agent is amazing. She held my hand through the whole thing. And then I literally said, if we don't get a bite by like X date, I'm quitting and I'm going to do indie pub again. 2 weeks later, she was like, we have offers. And she said that she knew this, but she couldn't like tell me until it was like official. So she's like, when you told me that, I was just like biting my tongue so hard. But yeah, so we had some offers and Montlake was one of them. And after I talked to Lauren, the editor, Lauren Plude, I fell in love immediately. And I was like, yeah, you guys are my home.
That's amazing. I think it's interesting because we have this discussion on here quite a few times. Two things I want to take out of that is one, category and genre. We talk about how important it is, and I think it's very difficult these days to associate where your book should be because there are a lot of blurred lines. Like young adult, what it was, when I was reading it when I was a teenager, is not what young adult is today. And you're right in the sense that like Sarah J. Maas just went with it, and she's Sarah J. Maas, so she can. And it's absolutely amazing, but it does make it very difficult because there really isn't anything, as you said, like new adult. And I was having this conversation the other day. New adult isn't really, like, it is a genre, but it's not something that massively appeals to an audience because they don't know what they're in for. Whereas when people look at young adult, in my belief, I think when people look at young adult, they think, oh yeah, that's where Veronica Roth came from. That's where Cassandra Clare came from. That's where Twilight came from. Like, they know what they're in for. Whereas anything past that, they think is the dark, Lord of the Rings, or epic fantasy. They don't realize that it's kind of the same. It's just a little bit more adult and usually has a little bit more steam in it.
I completely agree because some people think because a new adult in romance is closer to erotica, right? So like people are like, oh, is it going to be, for lack of a better word, like smutty? Or is it like, what is that? Like, what does that mean for fantasy? What does that mean for contemporary romance? What does that mean for any, sci-fi? for a new adult. And really, that's why that term, like when you go to store, like bookstores, I think there might be a new adult section, but it's a little bit mixed because it's like, what does go there? And I think that's why even when I talk about my book, my publisher specifically said, she's like, it's not new adult, it's adult, or it's just fantasy. She's like, it's just romantic fantasy because that's what it is. And I was like, yeah, I guess so. So yeah, it's a tricky, but that's why I love indie pubbing, because I think indie published books, because there's no shelf, I mean, besides unless you're categorizing it on the ebook page or whatever, there's just a beautiful blend of genres. I think that it's so lovely. And I think a lot of chances are taken in indie publishing that traditional books unfortunately don't always get, unless, you know, you've hit it out of the ballpark with your first books and then they trust you enough to be like, yeah, try this, like Sarah J. Maas. But yeah, I think that's what's so tricky about writing adult, you know, any genre beyond young adult.
I think that's so interesting. I remember what my second part was too, is about when you said when you're talking to the editor who's in Montlake and you fell in love and you knew that was home. And I can't stress this enough to those who are watching, is that, you know, make sure that you are going into the right relationship, especially when it's contract bound, because I know a lot of people who get excited, and I've done this in the past. I started young and I made a lot of foolish mistakes before I had any business sense about me. But I've gone into agreements with people and they would never write with me. And now I know to trust my gut when I'm making any decisions, because I'm like, if they don't feel like they have me in best interest, if they're not wanting to be a part of my journey or follow my journey, then this isn't the right person for me. And I think that's amazing that you knew straight away, talking, this is where I'm meant to be. This is where my book will be celebrated. And I absolutely adore that.
Yeah. And I think another thing to add to that, and I didn't know this until I was on the other side, is you need to find an editor who has a vision for you beyond the vision you have. Because I mean, you said like I'm humble, and I am. Like I'm very bad at talking about myself in like boastful ways, I guess, which I don't know. But she is always so good because she's like, we're gonna make you the next this, we're gonna make you the next that. Like these books are gonna do this, that, and the other thing. And I'm like, oh, okay, like that's great. Like I can see it now. You know, I can put on my vision board, but you need someone in your camp that's going to be dreaming bigger, honestly, than you can dream, because they're the ones that probably can see it because they're in, you know, in the publishing world. They can see beyond the veil. And, you know, we're just in our little writer's cave, like seeing like, I just want one person to read this. So I think that's what's so important, is like, if you're having conversations with editors, ask them like, where do you see my career going with you? Because that's something that I didn't even know was an important thing until I was there, and she had that. And I was like, wow, thank goodness I'm with you that you have this, because it's, you know, it's happening, it's trickling, it's getting bigger.
And I think too, like this is the difference when it comes to indie and traditionally published. And as it is, I'm currently indie, I do want to go traditional so I can have the best of both worlds and learn lots. And the thing is too, is like with indie, we're not short-sighted, but we're like, we need to release this book now and then we'll do this and we'll complete this series. And then I think after we're in it for a couple of years, that's when we become a lot more conscious of our brand. Like when we have, you know, X amount of books, we're like, oh, what is the umbrella I'm building? What's the painting? And a lot of the time we're learning as we go what to do. This is what the new trend is, or whatever it is. Like I need to market it this way now. Whereas when you do go into traditionally publishing, you do have those hundreds of years of knowledge. You have the people who have been doing this in and out, and they can hold your hand and guide you through. So, and I think a small part of us too, as we are dreamers, but we're a little bit scared and have a bit of self-doubt too, because we don't know our full potential until somebody else is like, you are a golden child. This is where we're going to take you. It's kind of validating, I want to say as well, I imagine.
Oh, yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, because think about, and this is why I I cannot, even if I don't like a book, I can't really say anything bad about it, because they finished a friggin' book. Like it's so hard to finish a book. I'll say it now and I'll say it till the end of time. Like it takes so much discipline. It takes so much work, alone time, just the whole thing to write it, that I'm proud of anybody that can finish it, unless they're plagiarizing somebody. But like if it's of their own creation, and like maybe they have, you know, my first books need a lot more editing and not a whole thing, you know, like debut books are always like going to be wrought with like some issues. But for me, I'm like, if you've written that book, amazing, congratulations, be proud of yourself, because not a lot of people can say that. Like, not a lot of people, there's a lot of people that say they want to write books, and we'll meet them as someone who's writing a book. You'll meet them like, oh, I want to write a book. But someone who actually writes a book, I think is amazing. And I think we lose sight of that because we're so alone. And so much of it is in this screen we can't tangibly like hold until we have like, the bound book. And even then you're just like, I don't know, I go into fugue state. I'm like, I don't remember any of this. But that's when I get really excited, because I'm just like, anybody that can do this, it should feel great about themselves. And I always have to kind of go back to that too, because it's really hard for me to celebrate my achievements because it's somehow like behind me, or I don't really understand what I just did. And yes, I think having mirrors around you who can reflect that is so important.
And it's so funny because this is like a conversation that is often had, is that you need to celebrate success, because, and I like personally, I was really difficult, which is why I'm such an advocate for it now, because the first couple of years I was like going. And then I was like, oh, I'm not getting anywhere. Like, I've platooned, what am I doing? Everyone's like, stop for 2 seconds, breathe, look behind you, look what you've achieved. And when I did that, I was like, oh my gosh, I am a total badass. Like, it's so important to do that.
Yeah. And I think, I was reading a post the other day by Carly Waters. She's a literary agent for New Leaf. And she had a post about toxic positivity in the publishing world. And it was really an interesting phrase. It kind of like stopped me in my swiping, thumbing through stuff. I was like, toxic positivity. I was like, what does that mean? And then she explained it. And it was basically how in the publishing world, people are always cheerleading the new and shiny and like, oh my God, you made this list, or oh my God, you did this, or that's amazing, but it creates this toxicity because it doesn't allow us to sit with it. We're kind of always chasing that like shiny object. And it makes it feel like we can't celebrate something unless it hits lists, unless it gets X reviews, unless this, that, and the other thing. It's like, oh, well, my book just is out in the world then. It's nothing to celebrate because it doesn't have all those positivity, rainbows, banners, the whole thing. And I thought that was, and another part of that was that we don't know that much behind the publishing world. Like, we are not shared that much data of like why things hit those lists, or why, this got on, this editorial magazine and so forth and so on. Like, how does that happen? So I thought that was really interesting. And it made me like, I reached out to her because I was like, this is such an interesting phrase, and something I'm kind of experiencing now, just with like, I think the debut of this novel, and I don't know what to do with it. And I think I'm like, alone with myself here, like being like, oh my God. So I have to talk to my agent a lot to be like, I'm celebrating. She's like, yeah, celebrate. Because I feel like it's constantly on to like the next book or the next thing to meet that like positive like vibe again.
And it's so hard. It's so hard too, because obviously this is fresh for you and you've had a lot of success with this book, which is absolutely amazing. But I find the inner conflict is you're already invested into the next book. By the time that you have published this book, your mind is focused on the next book, on what's happening. So you're like, oh my goodness, that book's finally released. That's amazing. But to receive that much love and joy and excitement about your books, and then like honestly having 2,000 ratings and reviews within the first week, it's just mind-blowing. Like, that's such congratulations. How are you processing? Actually, I guess I should have asked that at the start. How are you?
Yeah, I mean, it's really weird, honestly. I think, as someone who's written, multiple books, and we put so much hard work into them, and then to receive recognition of this magnitude about it it feels great, but it also feels surreal, because I've had so many books published prior that have done well, but it's not, they've done well, but they're not, I don't know, getting all the like the pretty, orange banners on things, number ones, that it's a new thing for me to experience. And I do have to sit with it. And the fact that I'm working on a new manuscript and working on this stuff, it is weird, because I'm, working on this marketing stuff, and Forever Rains has been with me for like 3 to 5 years. So it just feels weird. I don't know. I guess I'm not processing it yet is the short answer. But I'm definitely, I think those around me have let me like sit and really experience it. And I think that's why you see this, because I have never done this before for any of my books. I've never made like a shrine, but I've purposefully printed out like my Kirkus review and like any positive review, because I think I need to see it to believe it again, you know, to remember that this happened. So that's what this is for, is me trying to process.
So amazing. I was actually a couple of weeks ago. Do you know Lisa Vino?
No.
No. So she writes like alpha werewolf romance, but her and I were having an interview and discussion about a box that she does. So we're talking about like manifesting and, you know, positivity. And she actually has a box where every amazing thing that happens, she puts in a box. And then whenever she is having days, she'll go in, she'll be like, oh, this is a review I had. This is I had this, I achieved this. And I thought it was such a good idea, because we often forget those small steps that got us to where we are now. And obviously we're still going. So I thought that was a brilliant idea. And I think it's awesome that you've created, right? Because now I can just like drool over that cover and be so depressed still that I have to wait until October. But that's fine. That's fine.
No, and I love that. And I think for anything we have to do that, because it's constantly on to the next thing. And art now is content, and that's so brutal to realize, in our world, but it's the reality. And I think we need to take a step back and pretend we're in that museum again, looking at art on a wall and taking it in, because that's the only way that's the only way I can take it in, is if it's on a wall. So yeah, I love that little daily pull out of a hat thing.
What I'm a little bit curious now, because you do work in marketing as well, which is, for any author who's watching this, is probably like, dang it, how could she be any more perfect? Because literally like the two aspects that we have to manage is writing and marketing, but to also do marketing as a full-time job as well. What does your day-to-day look like? How is your work-life balance?
Yeah. Whew. Well,
new baby as well. So
yeah. That's the new balance. That's the new. I think that if people ask me, they're like, well, how do you balance work and writing? I'm like, it's really balancing a baby and writing, I think, more than anything, which I still need to figure out. We'll see. But before he was born, it was very much, well, I was freelance for a long time. So I was able to work and then take off X amount of months to like get my manuscript done, which was great. And I loved it. And then since we moved to Colorado, I've been full-time at an agency, running a creative department, and it's harder, but it's still like the weekends and either early mornings or late nights, or if I need to take off like a week, it's not for vacation, it's for writing. So it's sacrifice, and like I said, it's discipline. And that's why anybody that's doing this, I think, also just to demystify everything now, it's really only the 1% of us that can do this full time. I mean, I don't know if you have another job with what you're doing, but it's, unless like there's someone else making, most of the money, a lot of writers have some other form of income, whether that's writing for magazines, publishing other stuff. Because yeah, you don't want insurance in America is ridiculous. And so like you need a lot of money if you're not going to have insurance paid for you by a company. But yeah, so it's been a balance, but I figured it out. And now with the baby who was born in March, I love him so much. And it's been interesting, because before I could be like, oh, so my husband's going to probably like get mad at me for saying this, but like if I wasn't hanging out with him for a second, I could handle it. Like I'd be like, okay, I'm going to go write, and you'll go do your thing. But because he's like, my son is growing so quickly, I'm like, every time I'm not up with him, I'm like, oh, what is he doing? Like, is he growing? Like, and I can't see him. So that's what I think is going to be harder, missing some weekends to write, without seeing him. So I'll deal with it. And luckily I have a really amazing partner. But it's hard. I mean, it's hard.
It's so interesting. I actually came across on TikTok, by the way. I follow you there also.
My sad TikTok.
I love it. Honestly, I was so against TikTok so many months ago, and then I hopped on it. Now I love TikTok. But so now, like, I'm literally saying, do you have TikTok? Do you want to be friends? Let's be friends on TikTok. But I do follow Victoria Avia, who obviously writes Red Queen. And I love her TikTok. Her TikTok is so on point. She knows what she's doing. It's great. But she did have, it was only yesterday I was watching a video and she was talking about, as you said, demystifying that not everyone can do this full time. And the reason behind that is, as she said, they've had partners to support them. When she started, she lived with her parents for a year. She had a year until her loans kicked in, her uni loans kicked in, and she sold the manuscript of Red Queen on month 11. So she had one more month until all that kicked in and she was looking for work at that time. And so I found that really interesting because I think this is a conversation that really needs to be had, because I think there is a bit of a screen up sometimes where we want it to look beautifully glazed, like it's perfect. We're an author, this is the dream. And for some, that is very true and that's amazing. But also for others, it isn't necessarily there. And even if they do have that financial income that they could live off it full time, most do have other jobs as well because they need outside stimulation, because it is a very solitude craft. So they want to have that side where they're interacting with human beings, so to speak. So I think it's very interesting that you raise that. It's a really good point.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm sure you do too. I have plenty of friends that do this full time and there's so much anxiety around it because they're the breadwinners of their family. And like any job, I think that you're like the sole income for them. It creates it as a business. And I'm always curious because I think writing is a very magical thing where you have to be so in love with it and you get carried away and you forget your surroundings and that whole thing. There is that romance, but I don't know, like what would it be like if this was the sole income and everything would, I'm sure knowing myself, there'd be so many layers of anxiety on it with like sales and constantly on top of it. But yeah, it's an interesting game because it's like, I want to do it more. I want to have more time, but I also do really love marketing. I work for a cause-based company right now. So we help those, certain causes that help others, like those who suffer addiction and, things like that. And I love it because I feel like I'm doing good there. So I also don't want to give that up. So it's definitely an interesting juggle, but yeah, there's a lot of people that do more than one thing, for sure.
Of course, we have numerous passions, and I absolutely love that you do that as well. Which actually brings me on to my next question. You have a fundraiser. You're a co-founder. Can we talk a little bit about that? How did you get involved with that?
Yeah, so She Is Booked is my fundraising organization that I made with Natasha Mignoso, who is Book Barista on Instagram. Her and I met, I think I like fangirled her like way back when in New York. I was at some Colleen Hoover event at the Strand and she was there. I forget. She'll probably get mad at me for not remembering our meet cute, but we found love instantly. We both lived in New York. We actually lived like a block away from each other in Brooklyn. So we were constantly like, getting bagels together, doing all that stuff. And during the Kavanaugh hearings, she has this amazing platform on Instagram and I had a platform on Instagram. And during the Kavanaugh hearings, everyone was very angry and the whole Me Too movement was happening. And there was this moment where I was just like, I can only complain so much publicly and not do it. Like, I think everybody was desperate to try and do something to feel, I don't know, to try and help or try to just calm their own rage that was happening inside, but specifically a lot of females. So I called up Natasha and I was like, Natasha, like, what can we do? Like, we have these platforms. What can we do to help ourselves and to help others like through it? We wanted it to be small. Like, we kept brainstorming. We're like, we want it to be something that to show like one small thing can make such a big difference. So that's kind of where She Is Booked came up. We wanted it to be book themed because that's where our platforms were. We're in the book community. We also knew that readers are a force when they come to support something. I mean, they literally come out in droves. Once they believe in a cause, they really like put all their weight behind it. So we came up with She Is Booked, which was very small, which was like, we made a bookmark. It was like this little bookmark. We made a few, and all the proceeds would go towards female charities or female causes. So that's where that came from. And we sold out immediately. I mean, we had like thousands of bookmarks and we sold out immediately. And we were able, I think it's been like a year and a half Since it came out, we've raised thousands and thousands of dollars for female causes and female charities. And since then, we've had like a lot of like Bookbow, which is a book themed company that does like the book sleeves to protect them. They came out and they helped support us and made some products that sold out immediately. Again, we're a little bit on hiatus because of my book coming out and me being pregnant, but we have like a bunch of new products coming out. But yeah, that's where it started, and we were just overwhelmed and so grateful, and I had so much gratitude towards the reading community because they did it. They came out, they bought bookmarks. That small, it was like one small thing can make such a huge difference, and it did. It really, like, we've supported I think like 6 or 7 charities now.
Oh, goodness, that's amazing. Well, and that's still continuing, isn't it?
Yeah, it's still continuing, right? We've sold out of all of our products. So that's when I was like, well, let's shut the shop down for a second while, you know, Natasha moved and the whole thing. So it was kind of weirdly serendipitous timing. But we have new products being thought of. We have some collaborations we're excited to promote and share, and that's hopefully by the end of this year we might get it back up and running. But it was just Natasha and I doing it, so you know, you can imagine when this launched, we had no idea what would happen, and then it sold out immediately, and then her and I like cut to us in the living room, like on the floor trying to put all these packages together. We're like, oh my god, what are we doing? We're not business like women, like we don't know how to do this. So yeah, it was a great surprise, and it's been amazing, and I feel just like everyone else who's contributed, I feel really good that it's, you know, been such a pouring of love and support for it.
Wow, I absolutely love that. That's amazing. I will be keeping an eye out for that because I 120% support that. I want to know, what has been your most memorable reader moment?
Oof. As in a connection, or?
Yeah, like something that really was super heartfelt for you, you know, whether it's something that somebody did or said, or just something that you weren't expecting for a reader to engage with you in a certain way or to connect with you.
I think it's been so long since I've had signings because COVID and stuff, but I remember I was at this one signing and someone came and gave me like a little booklet of all like cutouts of like all of the amazing like reviews of, it was for the Dreamland series, like all the amazing reviews, and like basically she went around being like, look at all the comments and all the people that love you and here. And I thought that was so nice because I don't know how you are with your reviews, but I try and avoid them like the plague, because I get very like, unless I like somehow can funnel them through, I just like can't read reviews, and you know, I don't know, they get in my head. So she's in my, you know, was in my reader group and she knew that. So the fact that she did that for me, she like, look what people are saying about your work, I thought was so kind, and I loved it.
What would you say your top 3 marketing tips would be for fellow writers or authors who are watching this?
Well, I think the first one is take your time. Don't rush into, if you're doing the indie publishing route, even the trad publishing route, well, you can't really rush into too much there because it takes time, but sit with it for a second, like finish your book, no matter what you do, finish your book. And then think about, you can write in different genres, like you can write contemporary and fantasy and all that stuff, but think about what do you want out of that? And you don't need to necessarily know the book's like the exact subject matter, but I think it's good to know like, what do you want your brand to be? And it can change eventually, but to come out with a strong like platforms, like have a website. And that's what I mean by take your time. Like before you publish your book or wherever, make sure you have Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, even though we all hate it, and a website, because people will look for that. And you know, you can also choose your platform. Like I'm way more active on Instagram than any of the other ones, but I still have it there because I know people are there. So I'll, you know, ping stuff there eventually, but take your time. So set it up, make sure you have all those things, a website, the whole thing, to know. I think that's really what your brand is, and make it look cohesive. So your author photo is the same in each place, and your byline is the same in each place, and be professional. I guess maybe that's my second one, is be professional looking, because I think people will, and look at authors that you love, that you might be writing similar genres in, and how do they design their marketing. So, you know, fantasy authors' websites look a lot different than contemporary romance authors. And it's lovely to see, but that's quickly. You'll be able to see that when you go through them, or science fiction or whatever. So that's, I think, where you can start your brand. So, and then the third one, I guess, would be, I mean, I don't know if this is more of a mental health tip, but don't, or I should say do, for the positive. Do be kind to yourself with what you put out there, and do know that even if it doesn't get a bunch of likes or retweets or whatever, it's still good that it's out there and that you're doing the marketing, because eventually it will, it's like a snowball. Like you keep doing it and it'll keep growing. So everyone starts somewhere, everyone starts at zero, and then, you know, they grow. So as long as you start there, I think is the most important thing.
Yeah. And one thing I've learned, especially from doing these interviews, I think I've done over 60 now, and I love hearing about, we're all here for the same thing. Like we all have the same passion, and yet hearing how everyone's path was very different. And I absolutely love that, because everyone's journey is different in this. You can't compare yourself to any other author, because you all started at different times. You are all having different opportunities, different doors to get you to where it is. And I think that's what's so exciting about this career path, is there is no cookie cutter way. It is your path and your path alone. So I think those are amazing tips.
Oh, thanks.
I want to know, this is my favorite question to ask. What is the big goal for you? What is the dream that you have for your writing career?
Well, I'll just say it now. I would love for something I write to become a TV series. I love Shadow and Bones. I love Bridgertons. I think anything fantasy right now. I mean, I love movies, but I just think TV series, you can get into the details of if it's a book to a screen, I want it to be a TV screen, because I really think you can get into all the details found in books and like explore stuff and take your time. So that would be an amazing goal of mine, is if something I write eventually becomes on the screen. My sister is also a costume designer, so I've had dreams of working with her, in some capacity. So yeah, that would be the ultimate goal, I think, to be able to work with my sister on some sort of project that is on TV.
And I can honestly, I can see that happening, which is like, I'm like, watch this space. This is amazing. The mention of Bridgerton too, actually, I just want to do a referral from the book of yours that I've read. I would very much say it is a bit of like Lee Bardugo cross Bridgerton. Like it's definitely got those themes in it. So for those who love that, read that today. I have a segment called Speed Dating with an Author. So you and I are going to go on a very romantic date. I have lit a candle. You have also lit a candle, so double ambience. And what it basically is 5 rapid questions. Are you ready?
Yes.
Amazing. What is the most clumsiest moment you've ever had?
Maybe now, forgetting my words when I was talking about when she is booked, maybe.
I feel like I experience that every day. So if you're only having that now, then I'm screwed.
Yeah.
What is the 3 words that would best describe you?
Oh man, I know I'm supposed to do this fast, but this is hard.
You're right. You can take your time.
I think I'm a pessimistic optimist, if that can be one word, hyphenated. I think I'm a dreamer, and I am supportive.
I love those.
Yeah.
What is the song that best describes you?
Oh my God. Probably some sort of epic fantasy song that, like, you know, is from World of Warcraft or something. Like, I don't know if it would be like with lyrics. I feel like I resonate more with like big epic fantasy songs.
Like music.
Yeah.
It's interesting that you mentioned World of Warcraft though. Are you a gamer?
Yeah, I used to play Warcraft a lot in college, and now, like, since I've had babies and stuff like that, it's like everything's trickled off, but I love video games.
Oh my gosh, you're a closet nerd as well.
Do you play video games? Oh, amazing. What do you play?
So I do more so like RPG. So the recent one I've been playing is Persona 5, because I enjoy manga and anime as well. I absolutely love the Japanese aesthetic. So Persona 5 is like a Japanese RPG game, but
yeah, I love RPG too. I can't do massive multiplayer online because it's like too much. Like I need like a path. So I love RPGs. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. I'm like, yeah, I'm not a nerd, but I don't tell a lot of people that because I'm like, that's like my closet nerd stuff. But yeah,
No,
so
that's
anime
amazing. I mean,
manga. Do
the
you
storytelling in those games are incredible.
absolutely, and it's so funny because I've had this conversation with people before. I have to give much credit to my desire to start writing from watching anime because their pauses, the way they articulate their emotions and such. I definitely think that's where I got a lot of my inspiration from. And I think it's the same thing with games because they do have a very strong theme, a very strong storyline. So I feel like you can definitely be influenced by those.
Oh yeah, and gaming is something I'm not as versed in anime. I mean, I loved like Sailor Moon and all, Avatar and that whole thing. I mean, I don't know if that would be anime, like I know some people are, but I think with video games, they have to be captivating because otherwise you just put it down. Like they have to kind of take you on this journey. So that's why the writing is incredible. I wanted all the way back in the day, I wanted to work for a video game company so badly. Yeah, but didn't happen. But I love that.
Just became an amazing author instead, but what are you going to do? What's your life motto?
You're always on the path.
Stop. I love that so much.
Well, credit the therapist, but I love that.
Your therapist is an amazing person. What is a unique talent or skill set that not many people know that you have?
None. I don't know. I don't think I have one. I mean, I used to play the harmonica well. I haven't played in a while. But I love that I used to play that. And man, I think I'm tapped out. I feel like I like, was in my cave writing for a while, and that's maybe that's my unique talent that I could come and say that I do. I don't know.
I will accept that but I think a lot of people know about this amazing unique talent, which is awesome. Tell us what's coming up. What are we looking out for? I know particularly the book behind you is the one that I have my eyes on right now in October, but tell us a little bit about that and what else we should be on the lookout for. Where do we find you?
Yeah, so my next book is Dance in the Burning Sea. I get up and I don't feel like getting up, but
much
over there.
Time.
Yeah. And that's Naya's book, which is the second sister. She's the middle sister, and she is the hypnotic power of dance. And this very much is, if you like, I can never say his name, Recent from Mist and Fury.
I always thought it was Rasand.
But I
could be wrong. I could be wrong. So this is going to be the
yeah. If you like enemies to lovers, if you like a bad boy, someone who's bad masking good, if you like a fiery heroine, this book is for you. I wrote this so fast, I guess a lot faster than Lakira's book because that took like 5 years. But this book took 2. And I'm really proud of it. And it comes out in October. And I'm so, so excited for everyone to read it. And then beyond that, I'm plotting the last book, Arabesa's book, who's the oldest sister. And that one's really near and dear to my heart and going to be difficult because of I'm not going to give anything away, but there's a lot of themes in there. There's a lot of the Thief Kingdom. It's about her and Zimri's relationship and like what's going on there. And that's a love letter to my oldest sister, which I think is why it's so hard because she has been the mother to us in so many ways growing up. I mean, my mom was a mom, but my older sister was very much the responsible one. And so much of Arabessa is in her. So there's a lot that I'm trying to pull out of it too. And yeah, so that's what I'm also working on right now.
Which sibling are you from your sister? Because I have 3 sisters, well, 2 sisters and a little brother, but I'm the eldest. So where do you go with the pecking chain?
I'm the second oldest. So so I guess there's 4 of us and I'm here.
Okay. So, and all girls?
All girls.
Oh my.
I know. Is your brother youngest?
Yes. So there is 5 years so me, then 5 years Jasmine, 5 years Paige, and then Tristan is 21 years younger than I am. So he's only 7 now, and it's so much fun because my mom's always like, stop picking on your little brother, and we're like, it doesn't matter, age doesn't matter, like we're still his sister. You just kind of rile him up. That's amazing. So where do we find you? Just I'm super excited about this book too because the bits you've already shown of the different soon-to-be couples, I would hope. But there was a particular scene I love. Is it Naya, sorry. I love her. There was a particular scene that I had read. It's just simply that they may have to go hunt and perhaps kill the pirate. And she had a smirk on her face, and I was like, I cannot wait until their story because there's so much friction. I'm very excited for it. But yeah, besides that, where do we find you?
You can find me on Instagram. I'm really on Instagram. Like that's where I think like daily, unfortunately, I should stop myself, but I'm there like every day, posting stuff. That's where I post most of my updates first. And then Twitter, Facebook. I just got on TikTok, which I'm learning. And then I think my newsletter is also a great place because my newsletter and Instagram is where I share most stuff first. And ejmellow.com is my website, so you can find all that stuff there. But if you just Google EJ Mellow, that's my Instagram, Twitter, and all the rest of it. So yeah.
And you mentioned you also have a reader group as well. Is that based on Facebook or?
Yeah, that's on Facebook. And it's a small reader group because they also get like previews of, I mean, anybody can enter. My assistant does a little bit of research to make sure everybody's, good to go in there. But yeah, that's where I give first chapters before people. I just posted a NetGalley link for this book in there and all that fun stuff. So yeah.
Oh, that's exciting. Amazing. I'll have to join and hopefully I pass the check, or they'll be like,
yeah, I think you will.
But I have had so much fun. Thank you so much for hopping on today.
Yeah, thank you so much for asking me to. This has been awesome.
Absolutely. And who knows, watch this space. We'll see what happens. And maybe I'll get you on maybe next year or something, and we'll see how much you've flourished and grown.
Yeah, thank you.
Awesome. Well, I'm going to love you and leave you, and I'll talk to you later.